If you're an aspiring entrepreneur and you have big ideas that you want to build, but you do not have the technical knowledge or know-how, and you definitely do not have a technical co-founder, then this episode is for you. I'm going to show you a much faster way than just wasting years of your life trying to convince developers and technical folks to join your startup and build your idea for you. And I can show you how you can do this yourself by becoming your own technical co-founder, just like I did. Here's the deal. If you're a non-technical founder, you've probably heard 100 times that you need a technical co-founder to build your product. I believe that too. And don't get me wrong, it's really important to have a technical person if you're building an internet-based product. But trying to convince other people who are experienced engineers to do the work for you is frankly a losing game. Welcome to Easier Said Than Done with me, Zubin, where I share with you the self-development that I did on my journey from 37-year-old lawyer to professional software engineer. The goal of this podcast is to show you how to actually do those things that are easier said than done. Trying to convince other people who are experienced engineers to do the work for you is frankly a losing game. They're just not going to be interested. They're going to look at you as a complete noob. They're going to be like, well, hey, what's in it for me? And it's too risky. And they've got better things to do, right? And it's super risky for you. This is an important point. The truth is, finding the right technical co-founder is ridiculously hard. And even if you do find someone, things can and often do fall apart, even if you've known them for years. I wasted years looking for the perfect CTO or technical co-founder to join me, and I lost years looking for that. And then when I finally found someone, they were a good person, but actually they became my CTO because I paid the company they worked at a lot of money to develop my MVP, and then that person loved it so much they joined me. However, a few months into joining me, they had a baby and they had to leave. And that's when I finally decided to learn some basic coding instead. And that changed everything. It changed my life since then, right? I was a 37-year-old lawyer. I was trying to do the startup, and then I learned to code to keep the startup alive. And then I ended up joining Google a few years later. And now I work in big tech as a software engineer because, frankly, my startup failed, even with the right technical help, right? But that helped me to move forward. So if you're stuck in this loop of searching and waiting and hoping and pitching technical folks and hoping that some of them will give you the opportunity, then this episode is for you because you don't necessarily need that. So let's talk about how you can learn to code, not to a professional engineering grade. You definitely don't need to do that, but enough to achieve all your goals and hey, maybe even get funded, right? So you can get out of that rut and actually make momentum on your ideas and build a life and build the company that you're looking to build. Now, unfortunately, the startup world makes it sound like finding a technical co-founder is as simple as saying, hey, I've got this amazing idea. We're going to change the world together. Why don't you build it for me? You can do all the work and I'll take all the credit, but then, I'll give you some equity, which is worth nothing anyway, but that doesn't matter. One day it'll be worth $1 billion. Look, that's not how the real world works, okay? I spent years trying. Here's what my search looked like. I scrolled through endless forums, I scrolled through LinkedIn, I asked friends, I hit up my contact list, basically anywhere I thought I could find someone to code. Oh, I attended so many meetups, I've lost track, right? And I met people who were very capable, who I really wanted to partner with, who I knew could do the job, but because I was non-technical, I did not know how to correctly estimate. I would say stupid things like, this is not a hard app, this is a very simple app, this can be done pretty soon. But I had no basis on which to say this because I was non-technical. And so I incurred the anger and irritation of these people who are like, hey, you think it may be easy because it looks easy for you, but under the hood, engineering is a hard thing to do. Developing products is a hard thing to do. And you don't know how high this mountain is. So how do you know it's not a high mountain when you have never climbed this mountain before? They were right? I also met people who are very unmotivated, or people who are motivated for all the wrong reasons, or worse, people who completely assured me that they were on my side and then would not do anything, or wanted to get rich quick, or who knew as little as I did, but pretended they knew more, right? I, along the way, did meet a few people who were a good fit. And I did mention, I had my technical co-founder, Luke, who was a great guy, but he had family reasons for not wanting to continue, right? And so all through this experience, I realized most of the people, and I was really, really playing the volume game here. Like I'm talking about speaking to 15, 20 people per week for over a year. right? Trying to find someone. It was massive. Like I'd gone all into this thing. I'd quit my job. It was really important, right? And most people weren't interested in the idea. Some people were interested, but absolutely horrified that, I was non-technical, and they did not want to work with someone like that, even though I had a business background and all of that. They didn't care, right? In this world, engineering is really, really important to get your ideas off the ground. Now, keep in mind, this is 2017 or so. So it was well before the AI boom that we now have had started. There was a different machine learning and big data boom then, but not the large language model based Gen AI boom. So it was a very different world, right? Having said that, now that I'm technical, I know that just using LLMs to build a product is not going to work, right? Any success story you see out there of people who've done that are experienced engineers who compressed their time, like made it 10 times shorter to build something. So it took 2 weeks or 2 months more like it, rather than 20 months to build something, right? That's what's happened. But they're experienced coders. They know how to do it. They know exactly what to tell the LLM. They know how to debug. They know how to get unblocked, and they know all the systems and components that go into the system in order to make a robust app, right? Now, we know that if you look at the news, you'll see several people have done this. You'll see people have, built gaming startups and other startups for in about 2 months and got valuations and things like that. And I can assure you all of them had a very strongly technical person on the team doing it, right? You can also look at even before the AI LLM buzz, Peter Levels of levels.io and stuff. So he had created a bunch of little startups that were all monetized. They were all solopreneur kind of positively cash flowed startups that he had done, I think, the digital nomads list and a whole bunch of things, right? And he generates several $1 million a year, I think, from these remote work and nomad list and other things, right? But he was pretty technical, and he did this before the LLM boom. And now he uses that to make it even faster, to very quickly prototype ideas and discard them, right? So for him, doing it really fast. If you listen to his podcast on Lex Friedman, for example, he talks about doing it really fast because you can do that now with LLMs, but he has a strong technical background before that. He had built products before that. And so all he's done is compress the time to quickly test. If it doesn't work, he can throw it out. There's not a lot of time spent in building that out. And so you can throw it out, try a new idea until he finds things that works, right? And there's another guy, I think, Danny Postma. I think he coded something called Headline, which is a tool for AI-generated marketing copy, and he sold it for a 7-figure sum, right? All because he knew how to take an idea and build it himself anywhere, and he used AI to accelerate that. So, you can do stuff like that. And to be honest, a lot of these apps now that are getting high valuations, they're just wrappers. They're just thin little facades around like a ChatGPT or something like that. So there's not even something very defensible there, right? Now, of course, I'm not saying that those products are like that. I'm saying a lot of the startups in the AI space are just what are known as thin wrappers around an OpenAI or a Gemini model, and there's not a lot of IP that's gone into the actual product. The advantage that these people have is that they don't have to wait for somebody else to bring their ideas to life, because they were already technical or technical enough to start using AI in a really formidable way. So they could experiment and iterate and launch really fast, and then just let the market tell them whether it was a successful idea or not, which is a huge superpower, because every time they had an idea, they weren't dependent on somebody else to help bring it to life. They weren't dependent on somebody else's time. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is when you're super motivated about something, but you can't do something, right? Think of kids, for example, who really want to get to the game, who really want to get to the ice cream store, but they need their parents to drive them. Right? It's that sort of sense of frustrated impatience because you're completely dependent on the other person to help you get to where you want to go. And that's the opportunity you're missing if you don't know how to code. Now, again, not to a professional grade, just enough to really get a good job done, especially now with AI LLMs doing a lot of the heavy lifting, right? But you need to know how to play the instrument or how music should sound before you can compose and orchestrate and work with the AI, and you're the composer. And if you don't know music, you can't compose. So it's not just about creating products either. It's also about opening doors to new ideas and experimenting with markets and learning about business, because there's one thing to build a product, there's another thing to actually build a business using that product, because everything needs a revenue stream, and there's costs and expenses and legal and negotiations involved and all that. Now, going back to the technical stuff, if you're not technical, you're kind of stuck, like I said, waiting for somebody else to execute your vision. And I was in that position for years, for almost half a decade, right? And I'm telling you now, it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, I'm going to share with you very briefly This article I wrote in, 2019, right? In fact, I just started my first dev job, and I'd done this podcast with the Free Code Camp's Quincy Larson, the founder of Free Code Camp, back in 2019. And at the end of it, we talked about how becoming my own technical co-founder was such a big unlock for me, right? And so I wrote this blog back then, even though I just started my first dev job. In fact, I was going to start in April, I think, of 2019. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to have to, over the next 6 months, wind down my startup. And so I talked about, hey, how does being your own technical co-founder work? And I should call out, I actually got this idea from Sam Altman. He mentioned his own blog from many years ago when I was in TechCrunch in San Francisco, again, I think 2018 or maybe the end of 2017. And he mentioned how, it's faster mathematically to learn to hack yourself. And that was back then. This is before LLMs, right? So I took that idea very seriously when I saw him talking about it on stage. I read the blog, I took it very seriously, and then I decided to implement that in my own life. Now, it wasn't easy back then because obviously, it was still a different kind of world. It was almost 10 years ago. It's much easier now to learn with AI, but it's also much harder at one level because it gives you the impression of you being able to figure it out yourself. And like anything, you could, in theory, learn. Like, I'm a self-taught guitarist, but it took me 9 years to get any good. Had I got an instructor, I would have gotten pretty good in about 2 years, right? So we talk about massive differences in just quality when you get the right help. Now, the core problem when it comes to searching for a co-founder, in my view, is, of course, it takes a lot of time. It's very frustrating. You lose the opportunity because you're getting delayed every single day that someone's not building it. You're totally dependent on that person. It's a huge source of risk and anxiety. And every day that the thing doesn't get done because they don't bring the same level of intensity that you do, you lose the market opportunity. Somebody else could come in and steal your idea. Somebody else could come in and execute it better. Somebody with more funding or a better idea or more product history can come in and execute you before you've even started, right? And there's another deeply psychological one because, I'm all about the mindset and I'm all about the focus and all about controlling your mind and circumstances to effect big change in your life. Searching for a technical co-founder can feel like progress, could make you look like, hey, I'm doing things every day. It's like all those people who come to me to learn to code for the Parsity in a circle. And they're like, yeah, I've been doing this course and I've been in that course and I've been doing this course. And I'm like, you've been in courses for 2 years and you've not even got a single interview, right? And the reason for that is action is not all made equal. A lot of action is busy work that can look like progress, make you feel like, hey, I'm spending 3 hours a day on something. Sure, but is it in the right direction and is it moving the needle, right? Hi, if you want a no BS insight into how to change your career, whether to code or something else, and how to actually get job opportunities in tech, then please subscribe and like. It's no BS because I have zero incentive to mislead you. I just want to help you and give you tons of value so that you will consider working with me to get to your next career. Take a look at the description text below to learn more about the training I offer. But I do post content here regularly, and by subscribing and liking and hitting that notification bell, you will get to know when I post new industry insights for you. You'll also know within about 3 seconds if you want to learn more, but at least you won't miss out. Oh, and please follow me on LinkedIn too. I pretty much post there every single day. Just look for my name, Zubin Pratap. All right, so please like and subscribe to this channel, and let's get back to the episode. A lot of action is busy work that can look like progress, make you feel like, hey, I'm spending 3 hours a day on something. Sure, but is it moving the needle, right? Because you can run as fast as you want from New York to Los Angeles, but if you head east, you're never going to get there. It doesn't matter whether you take a plane. It doesn't matter how fast you go. If you're going from New York to Los Angeles and you go east or north, you're not going to get there, right? So the same reason, just being able to put in a lot of effort and brute force is not going to work. It'll make you feel like you're making progress, but it's not actually doing anything. You're probably just stalling, to be honest. And it's very time consuming. So here are let me try and summarize for you, the top 4 or 5 points that I think the real downsides to this, okay? Other than the ones I've already mentioned. So one is it's super time consuming. I did talk about that. It's finding the right person takes forever. And like dating, you don't really know if it's the right person until many months or years in, right? And you don't really know if it's a good fit. Now, the next point, I'd say number 2, is that it's a real gamble, okay? You're kind of relying on luck and hard work and pounding the pavement to find someone who's skilled and motivated and as committed to your vision as you are. And I can tell you, most people will tell you they are, but they're just not. They're not going to feel that fire in their belly the way you do, okay? Number 3, the more desperate you get, and this is the very subtle psychological one, right? But the more desperate you get, the more time is going by, the more frustrated and weakened you feel, the longer you search, then you're going to feel desperation. And desperation leads to very bad decisions, which are basically compromises. Now, I see this all the time with people wanting to change their career to code as well. So It's very similar to looking for a technical co-founder in that you want something, you're here, the thing you want is there, and you don't know how to actually close the gap, right? And that leads to desperation, frustration, because you're trying all these things, but the gap is not getting closed, and that leads to bad decisions and compromises and excuses and so on, right? So you end up settling for the wrong co-founder just to be able to move forward. Just like you end up settling for the wrong set of language or the wrong set of courses just to feel like you're making something, some sort of progress. Okay, the fourth one would be you lose credibility. Now, this is an important one. If you don't understand enough to talk about the thing you're asking someone else to do, so if you're asking someone else to build an app or a product for you, and you don't understand what that goes into that, and they use terminology that you don't understand, or you think you understand because you read it in a blog, but it's very clear. Like recently, one of the students talked about in one of the mock interviews that we do in the Past City Inner Circle, she talked about, had I known this, I would have used React because React helps to not repeat your code. Now, that's not really what React does. Any code can be built in a way, whether you build it with React or not, any other library or framework or just naked language, you can build it in ways to not repeat itself, right? But this person genuinely thought that that was React's big selling point, is that it helps you to reuse code in other parts. And I was like, well, that's not the main point of React. So, that's an example where in an interview, you could say something that clearly shows you don't have that level of depth. Not that person's fault. They're still only about 3 months in. But, it's dangerous sometimes to leak that kind of information that shows that you're a total noob or you're clueless, and that makes you lose credibility. Once you lose credibility, it's very hard to gain their respect or their trust or even their interest, right? Because they're not going to know whether you're doing a good job on your end. So why would they take all the risk of putting their time, because most likely you're not able to pay them, and if you're paying them, then they're just a freelancer. They're not a co-founder, right? And they're not a technical CTO or something like that. So if you're not able to really speak to them about the thing they're doing, how are you even going to supervise them, control them, manage them, point them in the right direction, give them feedback on what they're building? Because they're going to lose respect and trust for you if you don't know what you're talking about and you're trying to tell them how they should do their job. And you don't know if they're doing a good job or not. It's complete trust at that point in time, right? And number 5 is, this is a big mistake. And I get this all the time when people reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm trying to build a startup, Okay, here's the thing. Most people are so obsessed about building V0 of the product, the MVP, okay? Because that's all we think about. Oh, we build it and we launch it, and they just want to get to launch. But here's the truth. Launch is stage 1. Exactly like most people think learning to code is the most important step in changing your career to becoming an engineer. It's not. It's actually step 1 or step 2, right? Similarly, launching is step 1 or step 2. After that, you've got to actually maintain the product. This is the big thing that I was completely unprepared for. I'd spent high 5 figures, almost 6 figures, in building the first version of my application. And that's how I found my CTO, by the way. So again, it's not like he trusted me and joined me. He saw that I was pouring in tens of thousands of dollars of my own money and being in their office every day while him and his team were trying to build this. And he said, hey, I can probably do this on nights and weekends. And this is after 7 months of me paying them, right? I can probably do this on nights and weekends. If you give me a small cut, I'm happy to join because I really believe in this idea. Unfortunately, he had to move on, but that's a different matter because he had a baby. It's totally okay, right? But even when you find someone to do it, once they launch the product, your real work starts, because you're going to run into bugs, you're going to run into integration issues, you're going to run into user requirements or user experiences that weren't what you wanted. You're going to have feature requests, you're going to have technical issues, you're going to have APIs that change. And if you can't handle any of that yourself, you're back to square one, because what you're now stuck with is a product that doesn't work the way it needs to, and you're pouring more and more money and time in just maintaining it. That's why companies have software engineers going all the time, is because the real work is maintaining the application, not building new features. Okay, yes, for high growth companies, building new features. But really, think about your bank. Do you think they're building new features all the time? Maybe a few times a year, but on the whole, most of the work is in maintaining the existing applications, okay? So if you can't handle any of that yourself, you're really back to square one. And so please do not think that the work ends after the launch. The launch is not the big deal. The launch is a big milestone for you emotionally and psychologically, but from the product's point of view, it is day 0, okay? Now, just to give you a little bit of a positive spin on all this, there is some good news, okay? You don't need to be a professional level developer to fix this. I've mentioned this before. You do not need to get to pro grade. You do not need to do data structures and algorithms. You do not need to learn every framework and language to compete in interviews. Heck, you do not even need interviews, right? All you need is to get good enough at the coding stuff so that you have the freedom, power, and control to move forward without being dependent on anyone else. And here is the interesting part. When you do that, when you get to that level, like I did, suddenly technical co-founders just come out of the woodwork because they suddenly say, hey, this person's put in a lot of commitment. This person knows my language. This person understands the tools. This person can build it themselves and they're going to do it. And now they respect the fact that you're kind of like one of them and you've had that kind of hustle and grit. Okay. So I'm going to give you a couple of maybe 3 suggestions, okay, on how to solve this problem of becoming your own technical co-founder step by step. Step 1, just stop overthinking, start learning, okay? And I get it. The idea of learning to code can feel overwhelming. It's so much easier to just talk to people and hit them up on LinkedIn. This is the exact same problem that a lot of coders in the future in the Varsity Inner Circle program feel as well, right? Once they get good at the code, it's so addictive to just get good at the code. It's like, it's so easy to just reach out to people on LinkedIn, and they don't bother to market themselves to get interviews until I really write them about it, right? Similarly, it's very tempting to just stay stuck in, hey, I'm going to reach out to people on Twitter and LinkedIn or whatever it is, and on Reddit or whatever. And I'd much rather do that 5 hours a day than learn to code 5 hours a day. Now, here's the thing: if you learn to code 5 hours a day or 3 hours a day, in about 4 months, you'll be able to start building most of your things. But you have to be really intentional. Those 4 hours a day, and over those 3 or 4 months or whatever it is, 200 to 300 hours. If you can do 200 to 300 hours of focused, high quality, directionally correct learning, you can pretty much build anything you want after that, or learn what you need to after that. Like, that's the foundational piece, right? I say it takes about 200 to 300 hours to learn the basics of programming, enough to do things on your own. And then it takes about 300 to 400 hours to get ready for interviews and get to professional grade. But for you guys who want to be your own technical co-founders, 200 to 300 hours, if you never started before, say 300 hours, and you can get there, right? But it's really, really important to not do too much. In the Inner Circle program, we talk about the minimum effective dose, right? Which is basically do the least amount required to get to your goals, the minimum effective dose, okay? And your goal is to build a prototype. And as you build it, you'll learn more and you'll get better at building the next version, but just ship something to get real users to tell you whether it's any good or not. That's your goal. Do not need to get to professional grade standards, okay? So stop telling yourself that coding isn't for me, and I'd rather speak to other people, and my big strength is doing the big vision stuff. You can tell yourself all that, but you're not making any progress, okay? Just start working. If you want, join the Inner Circle program. You wouldn't be the first person who's doing entrepreneurial work in the program who doesn't want to become a SWE. In fact, I'd say about 20% of our students don't necessarily want to become software engineers. They want to become other things using that technical skill, right? So just start somewhere. Even if you don't want to work with us, that's totally okay. Pick something like a free code camp, or whatever it is, or a Udemy course, a good one, and stick to it. Do it 60 to 120 minutes a day and give it until about 200 hours. You'll be shocked with how much you can learn. Okay. Step 2 is build something small. Once you started getting the hang of it, about 200 hours in, unfortunately, this is where a lot of people mess up, right? They try to learn everything at once, or they try to jump around too much, or they don't stick with something long enough, or they're trying to build when they're learning to spell. You can't write an essay when you've just learned to spell and put sentences together, okay? Knowing how to spell or put some sentences together is not enough to teach you how to structure an entire essay or a novel. So don't leap to the novel stage. Start small. Just layer on the basics. Okay, for me, it was building a basic landing page, then working on the back end because I had to for the startup, to just understand how the data is set up. And to be honest, I think I spent weeks just understanding how my CTO guy had set up the Git repository, and I didn't know any of that. Like, the tooling is so important. It's not just about the language, just the tooling. How do I access this code? How do I read this? How do I understand what's going on here? If I want to change it, how do I safely change it so that I can bring it back? Like, things like that. That's what real world engineering is about. And for you, when you're building your startup, that's the kind of stuff you need to be really careful about, because if you break something, you need to know how to unbreak it. Okay. So learn about the tools, pick one small project at a time, practice, right? Think through problems, learn how to research problems. That's a big one when you're developing, especially when you're not at a professional grade, is you will come up against a lot of problems. Have that expectation up front. You're going to come up against a lot of problems, and you got to get good at researching it. And guys, I cannot tell you how much easier it is to research things now with AI LLMs, especially with Google AI search. It is so easy because it's a conversation and it's doing the research for you. Okay, you're delegating the research. I remember just 3 years ago, right? you had to research for hours and hours, sometimes days, go down all sorts of rabbit holes, make notes, and then try and pull it all together and experiment because you're doing the research. Now you're asking the questions and delegating the research, but you need to ask good questions, which will come with time, right? So the best way to do something simple to start small is to, pick an area you're already excited about. If it's your startup, for example, just start by learning the front end. How would you build a basic web page for it, right? You learn a lot of front end concepts and a lot of basic programming fundamentals. And then you say, well, I want a little bit of data, or I want to add a login or something like that. Just start small. And that becomes a project that consumes you for a week or two. That's how you do it. So that's step 2. Step 3, you want to use your coding experience as a way to build your own credibility and also empathy with what a professional developer does, right? One unexpected benefit of learning to code for me was that it completely changed the way I interacted with developers, which, by the way, is my theory as to why they were suddenly more interested to work with me, right? Before, I was that person, the one who'd say, hey, this should only take a couple of hours, right? Without having any clue what I was talking about. Oh, hey, you're a smart guy. You could knock this out in a weekend. I'd be that guy, right? How annoying. Now I get that a lot, and it really infuriates me. So I totally understand why the developers and the professional coders used to get mad at me back then, right? So understand the process well enough to have meaningful conversations. That builds your credibilities, right? Because developers will then take you much more seriously because they can see you've put in the effort to understand their world, which according to most developers means you're smart. I don't agree, but that's how a lot of developers think. And so they're going to give you props for that, right? But the big picture here is that even if you do decide to bring on a technical co-founder, which is not a bad idea at all, you're going to find it much easier to do then, and you remove the risk that if they leave or drop out, or something happens, or they lose interest, or you have a falling out, or they're not trustworthy or whatever, you can get rid of them if you need and continue without any serious loss of momentum, right? Because getting a partner only makes sense if you can also work with that partner to get the best out of them. And hey, if they leave, do you really want your startup to be at risk? Probably not, right? So you need to de-risk yourself as well. And you need to be able to communicate with them clearly, have the credibility to take the call on their decisions. And if need be, tell them to change their decisions because you're the one making the call, but you know enough to make that call. You have the credibility and the chops to make that call, right? And you're not completely dependent on them if they disagree. So let me leave you with some closing thoughts, right? Here's where I landed after years and years of trial and error the hard way, right? Learning to code honestly doesn't have to be just about becoming a full-time developer. In fact, I'd argue that learning to code is a skill that is useful because there's so many levels, right? It's like, why is sport important for kids in school? Most of them will never make will never make professional athletes, but it's important for all the other skills and for just the basic fitness, right? It's exactly the same principle. Why do so many of us learn things in school that we don't use in real life necessarily? Because it makes us more rounded and better and more effective at real life, okay? Same thing with sports and things. So I truly believe learning to be technical in this age, especially with AI, and most of us who are watching this will be knowledge workers, right? AI is a knowledge worker. So if you know how to code, you can work with tools much better than somebody else who doesn't know how to code. It just gives you that edge at the workplace. You don't have to be a professional software engineer. Like I said, I think 1 in 5 people in the Inner Circle program don't want to or decide not to become software engineers at the end because they find all these other options to achieve their life goals. And that's something we take very seriously in the Inner Circle program is we don't force you guys to become engineers at all. In fact, we try and talk you out of it and to encourage you to see other options because we go through about a month of goal setting and goal analysis. And it's very clear not many people want to actually become desk jockey software engineers, right? Like I was definitely one of them. So you want to combine those skills with other things to generate a whole bunch of lifestyle opportunities because, hey, jobs come and go, but the skills stay forever, right? And especially if you know how to learn. So if my closing thought on that is that if you're a non-technical founder and you're stuck searching for a co-founder, then, honestly, from experience, it's not the only path forward, right? Just learn a little bit enough to make yourself effective so that you can unblock yourself. And that can save you years. Guys, I'm not exaggerating, years of frustration and lost momentum, okay? Because the momentum in a new idea, in executing a new idea is so important. So start small, learn a little bit, have the right expectations, get good enough to get credibility with developers, teach yourself because then you de-risk your business because you'll never be dependent on somebody else. And you can hire and fire and you can execute even when things are a bit rough, you can still deliver, right? And hey, see where it takes you, right? You might just surprise yourself. I never wanted to be a Google engineer. Heck, I never wanted to be a professional software engineer. When I left the law, I was like, okay, I'm going to do the startup thing and that's it. And I failed. I failed big time, right? But it's changed my life. Like, I work remotely now. I work with amazing people. I work in tech and building things. I'm teaching people tech. It is a phenomenal life that I could not have accessed had I stayed on as a lawyer. And I accidentally fell into it because I was trying to be my own technical co-founder. All right. So thanks for listening to today's episode. I'll try and drop the links to that LinkedIn article from March 2019 in the description. But connect with me on LinkedIn, ask me questions. Happy to answer. I'll see you next time. And don't forget, keep moving forward.
Do it. Just subscribe. You know you got to do it.